what does co-production mean to you?
That's a really tough one. For me, co-production is the difference between doing it with the group and doing it to the group. So it's not taking your research design to a group of people either with dementia or carers of people with dementia and saying, this is what we're doing, isn't it wonderful? It is going at an early stage and saying, if you were designing a study to do X, what would you want to be remembered? Because it will be a very brave group that tells the research, no, what you've planned is rubbish, start again, when they know they're at the final stages. So I think it's about doing it much earlier.
Hmm. Thanks, Christine. Betty, I'm calling you Betty.
It
Bettina.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I agree with you, Christine. My pet hate is that researchers come into my community and I own it as mine being a black person and then say to me, oh, well, we've got this research study and we want you to be involved. Now, for me, that's a no-no. I want you to come to me before and say, we've got an idea. We don't know whether it'll work. Can we tell you about it? And we can pick it about, and then you can say yes or no. I want them to come to us before, just as you say,
Yeah.
Christine. Co for me is this bit. It's the joined up bit. You know, one of the flexible ones that we did, I reviewed last year, mentioned the name of a project, but didn't say what they were doing. Don't name drop. Come and say, this is what we are proposing. You may shoot us down, but let's hear it.
Yeah, I think that co-work bit of co-production is really important, isn't it? And I think you're
Yeah.
saying it's about sharing this research world together and not just being tokenistically picked up and put down.
Yeah.
I agree with that because for as long as I've been alive, equality and diversity inclusion doesn't include me unless there's a tick box and there's money associated with it. And I've always felt so, and I feel very strongly about that. I am an individual. My community is a community that's been around for a long time. We have a lot to put into research, but we are never asked at the beginning. We're always asked at the end, and it's, oh, look what we've done. We've worked with the Black community on this. And, the Black community, I went to a meeting yesterday and somebody said the exact same thing. You do the research, but we never hear the results of the research. We never get a short summary of the research. So for me, I'm not a tick box exercise. We are not a tick box exercise. We are helping you who are academics.
Yeah, I mean, I have to put my hands up and say I'm an ex-academic. So I'm coming at this from both sides, but I did engage in a lot of research, both when Trevor was alive and after he'd passed. And there was things like they wanted me to engage as a carer. And I'd say, okay, what are you providing for Trevor? Because if you want to interview me, somebody has to care for Trevor. And they say, oh, it's an hour's, we can give you an hour's care. So I'll bring him in. No, we'll pay for him to have an hour's care. No, it's half-hour travel each way. So you've got to give me 2 hours of care. And it was that lack of understanding of the circumstances that I think if you're asking to interview people, you need to show some understanding. And that's why I think engagement at an early stage can make that very obvious. So you think you've got a large budget, but actually, by the time you've paid for 2 hours of care plus travel, you are going to be galloping through that money. You might need a smaller group of people you're consulting with, but it's better for it to be a true consultation with a smaller group than superficial with a larger group.
I think that's a really good point. So how can you spot, how do you know when researchers are really getting it? That, I mean, that's a great example, Christine. Are there other examples when you just know, oh, they've got it, they've put this in place and it's working well for me?
I think the ones who in the how you involving people living with dementia have we'll have a meeting at the beginning and a meeting at the end. And I'm thinking, superficial, you're just think you can get a tick in this box. And if you were coming for an interview, I wouldn't even bother shortlisting you.
That's nice and practical, Christine.
Yeah, I agree with what Christine is saying. Having been a trainer in my past life, we had the KISS, keep it sweet and keep it simple. But for me, I want to see some written evidence. I went to and communicated with this community group. They said this,
Yeah.
and we were able to, or we weren't able to. It's about the words that you use. And I will keep saying this until the cows come home. I am not an academic. I'm a very practical person. So, you know, some of the language that you see, I'm thinking, oh God, what does that mean? And the acronyms. So keep it simple.
It's quite a skill, isn't it? Writing straightforwardly without being patronizing. So I think there's perhaps quite a lot of thought that people have to put in to kind of get away from some of the academic speak to be able to explain, because it doesn't have to be, I don't think you do necessarily have to have more words. You just have to really think.
I was going to say, picking up on what Bettina was saying, introducing that section by saying, after talking with 3 community groups about how we could best facilitate their engagement, we have decided. So they're showing that they've actually talked to people, and that starts to show a level of engagement, and it doesn't take many words. They could list the groups that they've, and people need to learn to use bulleted lists. We consulted with bullet, 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 bullet. And as a result, we have decided to bullet, bullet, bullet. They don't have to write continuous prose. They need to be a bit creative, and it makes it much clearer to the person assessing. Right, they consulted this, this, and this. They are now going to pay travel expenses, provide somebody to care for the person with dementia, or they are going to work in groups of 3 because any more is often too much. You know, that it makes it much clearer. And I think they need to think a bit like an equal opportunities job interview. To get shortlisted, you have to show you're hitting the criteria. And I was always taught to make it easy for the person reading your application to say, yep, hit that one, yep, hit that one, yep, hit that one. That's what they've got to think like. But the person they're trying to get past is me and Bettina.
Why is it important that researchers build people with dementia and carers into their applications?
I think it's important because of that expression of you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. And I often read things written about people with dementia, and it's a very idealized perception of what somebody with dementia is like. And I think meeting the reality and involving the reality in your research is more likely to make it have an impact on the people you're trying to have an impact on.
Yeah, I agree with that, Christine. And I also think for me, again, cultural sensitivity. because sometimes when you write your research paper, the language has got to be very inclusive. So for me, again, it's about cultural sensitivity. I can then go back into my community and says, guess what? So-and-so is going to do some research on us, and it's going to do this, 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 and this. What do you think? So I think, me personally, again, I've always found that researchers just don't, I don't know whether they don't understand or they are scared of touching cultural sensitivity, because there's nothing out there that's culturally appropriate at the moment.
I was just going to add, and in a way linked to that is age sensitivity, because a lot of the assumptions about dementia is about a particular age group, and that in itself limits you often to particular types of dementia. And so I think they need to recognize the different types of dementia and the impact that that could have on their research.
Fantastic. Any extra practical things? So we've talked about straightforward and simple, perhaps bullet points, not being tokenistic, you know, kind of really showing that you've engaged with people beforehand, maybe describing how you might follow up with people afterwards and keep them connected. Anything else that's going to jump out at you in a positive way when you read the applications?
I think they need to be quite realistic in their assumptions of what they can do. How far can they expect people to travel? Because travel can be quite difficult for people with dementia. What's the room going to be like? How near are the toilets? So I think just some sort of recognition that this group isn't a group of 30-something young adults. I'd like to see some recognition of that. Now, some of that will have come out of meeting the group prior, but if their bid is saying, I'm going to meet with the group to plan this, they still need to show in their application some understanding of that group.
And if somebody lives out in the sticks, as Christine said earlier, how long is it going to take to get there? And are you expecting that person to travel there, or are you prepared to go and see that person?
Yeah.
And I guess what you're saying is that there's all kinds of practical things that could be done, and but you'll be reading it and thinking, oh, they understand, they've given some consideration to what the needs of people with dementia and carers are. And I guess from your perspective, you believe it. You know, even if it's not perfect, even if it's a good attempt, they've not thought of everything. You're reading it and thinking, oh, I feel confident or comfortable with their approach. I've got some ideas about how they might improve it, but actually that's a pretty good attempt at understanding and sharing that with us.
They've got to be honest.
Yeah.
You've got to be honest in what you're saying.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. I think we've got a lovely video there.
Co-production can mean many things to many people. It can mean doing the basics of just editing the documents that are easy to read, or it can mean going to the other end. It can mean actually co-producing the question, co-producing the application, and then working through the research, asking in the interview, analysing and writing up. It's up to the individual, but to me it's all catnip to the brain, so I try and do as much as I can. I get tired, but I'd rather get tired at home than be bored in a care home. So, but equally, every individual with dementia is individual. We all have our own individuals, the symptoms are all different, and even though it might be the same dementia, but we do all have similar problems, like the kind of a stigma that still exists, the ability to get people to understand that we do have capacity, and sometimes the capacity might be less on one day than another, and that would mean that research has to be flexible in when they're doing co-production, in allowing us to have what we call our bad days or foggy days, because that's what it's like, just walking through fog, and then the next day you're all right again. And I think co-production for a researcher broadens their mind and hopefully makes them question even what they've been taught in a way. And one thing researchers are taught is to try and keep a distance, but because we are going to give researchers fairly intimate details of our lives, we need to know that we're talking to what I call a human, and there needs to be some sort of empathy between you. You can't just dive straight into the research and question us. We need to know that you've got feelings and that. They shouldn't use many acronyms. Obviously, the NHS will allow, but not many more. And don't use academic language. And again, it's how you write. I can spot whether you're going to be involving us properly and what you intend us to be doing within the application. And particular issue with me is you have to offer the NIHR rate of payment. If you value our opinions, they're valuable.